All right, third time's a charm. Third time recording this video. Today, I want to talk more about the hijacking of the divine feminine or just the feminine energy in general. And we're going to discuss that on the latest example, which you very clearly saw during the Olympics, but not just during the Olympics. It's just one of the many examples that are rolling out right now, and how this really plays into more female war energy. And I did discuss this briefly in the YouTube live, but it was a little bit all over the place. So I'm just going to go piece all the pieces together, and we're going to take it a few steps further in this one, because I'm actually going to show you pictures of what it looks like when a man with DSD is born and how they're being pushed in all these women categories. We're also going to talk more about, the stars and how they relate to this, not from an astrology standpoint. So what happened recently is we had the Olympics, which this is, the mascot of it. Also very dubious symbol, reminds me of, is this like a new agenda the Kabbalah is pushing? Like, what's the real symbol behind this? You have the red, you have the blue, you have all of that. But anyhow, we're going to just continue with this very specific topic. You had these two men who competed in women's categories, and they, of course, won because they're stronger than women, especially when it comes to boxing. Try to get into a boxing ring with a man, of course, the woman is typically going to lose. So we have these two men winning, and then the media is outraged, or just the general mainstream category clone person is outraged because they don't understand how someone can be not transgender, but still be a man and pass as a woman. The entire debate is whether or not these people are transgender, but that is actually not really the debate, because people are saying, especially people who follow more the liberal agenda or who don't really question their reality in the same way others do, they're saying, oh, someone from Algeria or possibly even China, they could not be transgender because this is like a Muslim culture and it's forbidden and all of this. Well, first and foremost, anyone who's in the public limelight, including these, but also including a football player, doesn't matter if it's American or European football, soccer in that sense, rugby, every single sport out there, tennis, you have it very clearly in tennis. You had like Steffi Graf, for example. But anyhow, so anyone who's really pushed is obviously a puppet to the Illuminati. Otherwise, you wouldn't be famous. You might still be able to compete in the Olympics, but you're not going to last very long. You're only going to last through one season max, maybe two, if even. And you're not going to be over and over again participating in competitions or Olympic competitions or any type of competitions, the yearly soccer, football matches. No, you're going to be out. If they can't control you, you're going to be out. So these are not regular people from that standpoint. Anyhow, they're very clearly used by someone to push a certain agenda in it. It's interesting that this happened exactly in August, around the same time that a yearly meteorite shower happens, which symbolizes exactly this, the hijacking and the freeing of the divine feminine, which we'll discuss more towards the end of this video. So these are not the typical transgender in that sense. What are they then? Well, this is what's happening. There's this thing called DSD, differences in sex development. It's a supposed rare condition, but I'm pretty sure it's becoming more and more common, because I wouldn't be surprised if this is also tied to the hormones in the air and the water, just pollution general around us, the toxins, chemical substances that are in our soil, like just in our environment in general. I wouldn't be surprised if this is really affecting people all over the world. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter if you're in a Western country, doesn't matter if you're in a poor third world country. They're obviously doing a whole bunch of experiments in these third world countries like Africa, like Southeast Asia, like everywhere else, South America. So doesn't even matter where you are. At this point, you're going to be under the influence of all the pollutants. And there are a lot of studies out there, are, for example, hormonal birth control, once it's released into the water, into the wasteways and everything, how it has impacted a lot of the masculine energy. So this could very much be tied to it. I'm not saying it is. However, this is a condition that might have even occurred 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, maybe just not to the same extent. And what's happening, just as an example, it's not the only condition. You can obviously also find it in not just in males, but also in females. But what happens in males or men is that they're born, for example, with their testicles more inside their body. You find this with dogs as well. And so it's confusing because just because you can't see them, it doesn't mean they don't exist. And so this entire gender gets confused from birth. They might be more feminine anyhow, and then all of a sudden, but they can make a woman pregnant, they can have children. So it doesn't really make sense from a standpoint of an educated person almost. And just imagine you're born into a poor country like Algeria or wherever this person was from. It makes almost no sense. It's almost like an anomaly that they're trying to hide somehow. And so this happens, and obviously a lot of coaches recruit people from poor countries anyhow. You know, you see a lot of African athletes out there. When you go to the marathon, especially here in New York City, which is the biggest marathon in the world, usually the people who win are always the African marathon like runners, or people who have that background, like actual African, not African American. And so you see that in every single Olympic sport out there as well. So they already go to these countries to recruit them. I'm not saying they're not good at all, but there's obviously, oh, they're known to be faster, they're known to be stronger, they're known to be this and that. And so what these coaches do is they go to these third world countries where people they don't have the energy, the time, the whatever to really concern themselves with the DSD or differences in sex. And all they know is, oh, this might be a woman, or this might be a girl, or this might be a man. And so they recruit them. They know exactly what's going on. They recruit them knowing they're men or knowing they're boys. And then they just do whatever therapy they do with these athletes. And a lot of them go through hormonal therapy, whatever. I actually have no idea what they do, but they do all these things to them, make them as feminine as they possibly can, not very successful in this case. And in that sense, it's not a traditional transgender thing that they're doing. It's just this disease, this condition, which is called differences in sex development. And you can look it up yourself too. You know, this is just a simplified version of it. You see this in dogs as well, where testicles are born inside of the dog, and some of those never get castrated or never get fixed, and then they go ahead and have puppies with another dog that wasn't fixed. So this happens quite commonly in nature as well. Not super, super common, but it does happen. So of course, why wouldn't it happen with humans either? Now, what you then have, and this has already been going on since 2004, that they don't do any type of sex testing, by the way. But what you do have in the 2016 Olympics is that all these three men won a medal, the gold, silver, and bronze medal in a women's category. And with a few of them, you can see that very clearly, right? Like especially this one in the middle, the guy in the middle, you see it very clearly. Maybe not as clearly with him, but you can with him as well. And usually you can even tell, you know, with the forehead when it's the receding hairline, like it's just so obvious, honestly. For people who have eyes to see, it's very obvious. Then you have this here where he's actually wearing a full-on shirt and they're not. And it's like, yeah, okay, what's going on here? A bit strange. And then this is just a feed that I was following from one of my friends who's really passionate about this subject, and she's really passionate about discovering the truth. So supposedly the International Boxing Association, which is not the International Olympic Committee, by the way, it's a different association. They do chromosome tests on their athletes, and both Lynn and Khalif, which are these two who won as men and women's categories, they tested for the XY chromosome, and they were not allowed to compete in that International Boxing Association as women because they're not women, they're men. But the Olympics does not perform this test and is supposedly just a simple cheek swab. And then there was this little Karen who was saying there's misinformation about the XY chromosomes of this specific athlete. No, it's not. And my friend actually replied saying the test is actually quite simple, not controversial, but they were actually excluded from the International Boxing Association, the IBA. They did accept the ruling, by the way, and they did move on because they couldn't sue. There was no grounds to sue. They had XY chromosomes. So in that case, they're men. You know, from a biological standpoint, they're men. Even if you're a man and you think you're a woman, you're still a man, you know? Like it's the entire fantasy of what they're pushing with these teenagers here in the US and also other westernized countries like Western Europe. Oh yeah, just through hormonal therapy, all of a sudden you'll be a woman. That's not really, yeah, it's super dangerous, but that's another topic. So here this person's wearing a groin to protect what? Females don't have testicles. Very strange, right? Then you have this thing happening too, where athletes, including men, were starting to show the X. Now, for me personally, I get it. You know, it is a form of support, but like I already said in other videos, the X is another Illuminati symbol. Everyone who has an X, like archaics, all of those people, everyone has an X in their name or who shows an X somehow. And I'm just showing it to demonstrate it in this video, not because I'm part of the Illuminati, but everyone who has an X is basically subconsciously enforcing this Illuminati symbol of the X. And the X is usually hiding something. It's putting this blockage on things, like this energetic, psychic blockage on things. Very hard to dig through that. But they are showing their support just with it. And it's just, you know, back like 40, 50, 60 years ago, you had to deal with other issues in women's sports. And now you actually have to deal with the issue that men are allowed to compete as women as long as they identify as women, supposedly. So another thing is that the Olympic Committee does not want to go back to sex testing, and they eliminated it when? In 2004, which is at this point when I'm recording this video exactly 20 years ago. So this is not new. Like I already said, back in 2016, in the 2016 Olympics, these men won. That is like 8 years ago from now. These men won. This is not a super, super new issue, but it has become this huge issue right now in this year. And that could have to very much do with what I'll discuss in the next slide. But basically, in 2004, they eliminated the sex testing, meaning that was probably also the time all these Olympic coaches, you know, saw their chance to go out there to these poor countries, these third world countries, and recruit these athletes who are biologically male, but maybe have the DSD, or who could pass as a woman, let's put it that way. And it's literally just a cheek swap, supposedly. And so now what we're dealing with is around August 11th to August 13th, which was quite recently from the date that I'm recording this video. We had the meteorite shower from, trying to pronounce it the right way, Perseus, the Perseid meteor shower. And mind you, for me personally, I do believe, you know, if we just assume it's all AI, including this entire star matrix around us, and it's created around us as part of the AI matrix, then this meteorite shower, all these planets, all these stars would be AI as well. And like I already said in my Atlantis video from a few years ago, the computer program that we're in is somehow broken or has a bug in it. And so we're being looped over and over again into these realities, meaning the reality we're currently in, all the parallel realities that are playing out in the parallel realm. And, you know, past lives don't really exist because it's all in parallel. That's where we're able to tap into those. Same with future potentials, future realities. So Perseus is an annual shower, and it actually happens annually in the summer. There's no coincidence that it was around the end of the Olympics this year with all the controversy playing out. What does Perseus stand for? Okay, let's just go into the definition of Perseus. I gotta find that one tab that I actually had open. Perseus is the hero who slew the Medusa and rescued the Princess Andromeda from the sea monster. And other characters are Cassiopeia, the winged horse Pegasus, all of which are also constellations. So what I really do think is that these constellations were projected onto the heavens. You know, what I got in one video, so what I got in the past is that all these constellations above us are somehow a frozen projection, such as Alpha Centauri, Hadar, and Pegasus, all of that. Similar with Perseus. It's always a good question to ask, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And does it start with the mythological heroes that once existed and that were somehow projected into the skies? Or are they just there to remind us that these myths existed and to wake us up from the mind wiping and the spells that were put on us, right? So it's really, to me, it's really like a chicken and egg question. What came first? The myths, the mythological things that played out in a different reality on a different plane somehow, the different plane from where we are now? Because we had so many resets and so many things happening to us that we're going just deeper, 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 deeper into this cave reality that we're in. The Earth we're in right now is not the same Earth we experienced possibly 2,000 years ago, 400 years ago, whatever. But anyhow, so our, you know, what came first, the mythological hero or the projection around it? So it's almost impossible to read on that too. I mean, it's not impossible, it's just very hard, because it's always like you keep getting looped back and forth between these two. It's like, okay, so there's a constellation, but how did it get up there? Did this hero really exist? And they just projected that story onto there for us to now see it and to decipher it. And that, for me, that's why astrology in that sense almost has no value. I'm not going to say it's invaluable, because for some people it gets them somewhere, or it's a different piece to a puzzle. But astrology is iffy because there's a lot of, similar to Mercury retrograde, some retrograde doesn't really happen. It's just the planet that moves less fast than the other planets around it. So it's not really in retrograde. And so it's similar to a lot of things that are happening in astrology. It's not really what people are saying it is. And similar to this, it's almost like, okay, if the constellations are all fake because they're fake of an AI matrix, the moon is fake, if the sun is even fake, what is really real and how much value does astrology really have? Just, a rhetoric question for people to ask who are really into that. But I do know people who study it for years and years and years. I just don't really see them as very, I don't want to say knowledgeable or smart. I just kind of don't, I still see them in a different type of program. Let's put it that way. But I'm sure there's some sort of value in it once you see through all the new age programs that were put on astrology. And astrology has been used for a very long time. Maybe we just have to go back to the original astrology that's barely taught anymore because it's like forgotten knowledge. Now, another thing that happened that I want to mention in this video is we had the Athens wildfires. And how is this tied to Perseus and Andromeda? Well, Andromeda, they're all part of the Greek mythology. But basically, Andromeda, if it kind of symbolizes the feminine energy or the female energy, Perseus was supposed to rescue that and maybe unable to because Athens is under fire, and Athens is very much tied to the goddess of Athena, because otherwise you wouldn't have the name Athens, right? I think that's quite clear. Athens is an ancient city. It has a lot of soul traps in it in and of itself. Whenever I was there, I hated the energy. I know I will have to go back at least a few times though. It's just such a chaotic energy, very hard to dig through. Also because so many new things were put on it. And it was never meant to be a city in the same way that Rome was always a city. Athens actually consists of very small villages that were kind of tied together, and that makes it even more confusing. So Athena, which is what Athens comes from, is the goddess of war, wisdom, and handicrafts. You see that right here. Pull this a little bit down. So she embodied cold rationality, tactics, and strategy. Athena's cold logic stood in direct contrast to, she had a brother, Ares, rage, violence, impulsiveness. That was also mentioned in the YouTube live though. For me personally, Athena was always the goddess of war. I never saw her as anything else. And she's also called Minerva in the Roman mythology, which they're all interchangeable because they're both ancient cultures. But I do think the Greek culture is a little bit more ancient than the Latin culture or the Latin language in general. Okay, so that was just a rundown of the hijacking of the feminine energy and how there's basically a war on women. But it's not just on women, it's just on genders in general. And when genders are imbalanced, it's going to create this huge imbalance that the world is currently seeing. And with the war energy, how Athena also shows, because it's the symbol for war, is that they're ramping out more Middle East war things. Right now, even though they're in talks for maybe a peace treaty or whatever, which I personally don't think is going to happen anytime soon. But they are ramping that out right now in the Middle East, which has been going on for quite a while, not just the past year, but decades, if not even hundreds of years. So that is interesting to see how all of this is playing out even more through the Olympics. If you just see all of these rituals, including the Lionsgate portal, including the Olympic rituals, they're all just there to siphon energy off of people, to try to enforce certain agendas, which you could very clearly see in this year. And it's just going to get more intense, by the way, and they're not just all of a sudden going to stop and we're going to go back to how things were 20 years ago. It's just going to get more and more intense. It's going to enrage more people. So obviously staying in that centered middle and not being swayed towards either extreme side would be advisable, because that's what they feed off of, the rage and the helplessness and the victim mentality of people. I hope this helped someone. Let me know if you have any comments. Would be interesting to know. Hope to see you soon again. And until then, bye guys.